Hello, everybody, and welcome to our little live stream about this year's edition of the Nimdzi 100. The full report has been published just this week. The ranking already came out about 2 weeks ago, where we ranked the 100 largest language service providers in the world. And then, of course, we always follow it up with a full analysis of the size and state of the language services industry every year. So this year in 2022, we looked at where the market is at. My name is Sarah Hickey. I'm the VP of Research at Nimdzi Insights, and I'm the lead analyst and writer for this report. But of course, I didn't do it alone. First of all, because it's a massive report, and also because here at Nimdzi, we have many different experts, and I would have been stupid not to consult them for this. So I brought a few of them with me today, starting maybe with the big boss, who I assume everyone knows. We have Renato Beninato.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having us. It's very exciting to be reporting on the growth of the industry for one more year.
Fantastic. And then next year we have our COO, Gabriel Karandziszowski.
Yeah, thank you for having us here, Sarah. It's been a fun project to work on, and yeah, lots to learn, lots to talk about.
And of course, one of my favorite colleagues, Belen Agoyo Garcia. My Spanish not so good. Sorry, Ben.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having us, and thank you everybody who is watching. I hope you will enjoy my little section on media and game localization.
Yeah, so this year we're doing it a little differently. Usually we do a webinar with a full slide deck, and I think it's been good in the past, but we like to make it a little bit more lively this year. So that's why we're doing a live stream with a bit more of a discussion around the different topics that we're addressing in the Nimdzi 100. And we actually hope to hear from you as well. So please put your comments in all the comment fields. Tucker is working the tech in the background, and he will check the comments. I already see a few. Hello, everybody. Lots of people tuning in from all around the world. So that's amazing. Oh, hey, Kostya. Thanks for tuning in as well. Okay, so let's kick it off. I first of all want to talk about growth, because there's been an incredible amount of growth in the industry in the last year. Of course, in 2020, growth, it didn't stop, but it slowed down because of the impact of the pandemic. And we could really see that in 2021, what the industry really made up for it. As you can see in this graph here as well, that's comparing 2020 to 2021. If we're looking at the different segments of the ranking, like we see the full top 100, then top 10, 20, 50, and the last 50 positions, you see a massive difference there. And some of it is due to a backlog of from different industries because of the COVID impact. And some of it is due to mergers and acquisitions. Others also because, as we'll talk about more later in the live stream, because the LSPs have also really adapted to the new normal that we're in. They've added new services. They went into new verticals, have new clients, went to different markets. So basically, after a bit of a slower year, 2021 more than made up for it when it comes to growth. We actually have a few graphs that illustrate this. Tucker, maybe you can show the next one as well. I think this is a graph that Renato will probably like and maybe have words on, because you were just talking about how much the industry has grown as well in the last 17 years.
Yeah, here we see, if we take the top 100 companies as a proxy for the industry as a whole, it's a good indicator. It's not necessarily true as you go down in the sizes of companies. This is a massive industry with lots of small players that are under the radar in our research. But the first time that I measured the industry in 2005, I estimated the industry at about $30 billion in size, 29 and change. And it took about 17 years until now, 2021, for the industry to reach about $60 billion. So in 2021, we estimated that the industry was around $16.5 billion in size. And this is impressive growth for any industry. Any industry would be happy to have this amount of growth, but we haven't seen. I think if you look at this graph here, we were almost flat 2017 to 2018, but we're back on the growth trajectory as the years went by. 2019, 2021. One of the conversations that we had at the beginning of the pandemic was by how much less is the industry going to grow. We never thought that the industry was going to shrink because we haven't seen this industry shrinking ever.
Yes, exactly. And I actually kind of jumped the gun there a little bit with throwing you in about market size. So I'm sorry about that, Tucker, because you were on a different slide, and everyone watching as well. That was, of course, those were the revenues of the top 100 by year. There's lots and lots of different graphs we have in here. So we're going to talk you through the different ones. This was the one actually that we should have looked at for a moment, which was that where we said that the industry reached 60.5 billion in 2021. And here's our 5-year growth projection. We have slightly adjusted our projection again, a little bit up, because we had such crazy growth in the last year, and because we expect the industry to continue to grow at a faster pace. Of course, not at the same pace as maybe in the last year that seemed to have been exceptionally amazing for most people, but still better because the industry is now better set up than before the pandemic. Because it was a little bit like what we talked about last year as well. The pandemic worked as an accelerator. A lot of the projects that have been put off by companies for many years and weren't prioritized, like more digitalization, or maybe we want to add this, maybe we want to do this. Well, when the pandemic hit, it had to happen really quickly. Everyone had to adapt. And you could tell that in 2021, that paid off. And of course, let's say a company that increase their digital offering, but they're not going to take it down again after the pandemic. It has been invested, it's paying off, or you acquired new clients, added new services. That's not going to go away again. So this is one of the reasons why we expect that the industry will continue to grow at a little bit of a faster pace, at least, than before the pandemic. So we put our CAGR, compound annual growth rate, estimate up to 7%, which was up from 6% the previous year.
Yeah, just to give some context, Sarah, and we have seen this consistently over the years. The global economy as a whole grows at an average in a good year of 4%. The most advanced economies like China, in a very, very good year, they're growing at 10%. So a 7% growth puts the language industry at a little bit above the growth rate of the general GDP growth of the world economy, world trade, and things like that, which are in this range, 3 to 5%. But a reason for that is the fact that, and we repeat this with quite frequently, is the fact that the language industry grows through 3 vectors. It grows by volume, which is the general volume of content that is created, but also by the number of languages and the number of platforms. Information today is shared more in video than it used to be 10 years ago. So that's a new platform that requires a new type of translation and more content in subtitling and dubbing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have more delivery mechanisms for content, you have more content, and you have a multiplication of languages. Just yesterday, John Juncker, who publishes the ranking of the top 150 websites by globalization, indicated that the average number of languages last year was 36, if I'm not mistaken. And 10 years ago, the number was half of that. So that's an important vector that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. And Renato, actually, since you're already talking, I think we might briefly want to talk about the first billion-dollar company in the industry. We have a graph there as well, Tucker, that shows the top 2 companies in the industry. There we go.
So
yeah, go ahead.
A mixture of organic growth and merger and acquisition, we have TransPerfect claimed the role of having the first billion-dollar company in terms of revenue. We must have, you all have heard the buzz around billion-dollar companies in terms of valuation, RWS, Keyword Studios, and companies that have reached valuations of over $1 billion. And for those of you who are layman in terms of this, the valuation is, for the companies that are publicly traded, is the value of the stock price of the company multiplied by the number of shares that that company has issued. So those valuations in the $3 billion range, they are not necessarily related with the revenue of the company. So this year we had the first company, and we already know that RWS, which was the number 2 company this year with $955 million in revenue, already surpassed $1 billion because they published their numbers in with the September calendar fiscal year. So their fiscal year ends on September 30th. So their results are a little off in terms of annual numbers. So another interesting point here for us to keep in mind is that Lionbridge sold a big chunk of their business to TELUS, their AI enablement business, and they shrunk. That's why they were in number 2. And RWS bought STL, who was one of the top 10 companies in the industry also. So this is what caused this change of the number 1 and number 2 in the industry. But keep in mind that here we're talking of the 2 top companies in the industry represent $2 billion, which is about 20% of the top 100 companies, right? There's a lot of concentration at the top here, and this is double of what it was last year. But again, it's like we're looking at 4 companies instead of looking at 2.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but it's just one more example of the level of growth we've seen. And of course, these are the top ones, and a lot of mergers and acquisitions played into this. In general, if we look at the top 100, but it's just an indicator for us. If we look in the last year, the top 100 positions grew more than 22% in comparison to the year before. So that is still significant and cannot be ignored. And here's an example of what you were talking about, Renato, of how the market is very fragmented still. I think it was 17.9% roughly if we add this up. Not that quick. And I forgot the exact figure. I apologize. But that the top 100 companies make up when we look at the total size of the market. So where it says everyone else, this graph basically represents this total size of the market. And then we have split it up into the top 10, which already make up $5.8 billion. And the next 90 then make up less, it's $5 billion, still a lot. In the watch list, we have about $3 billion, and then everything else is the rest. So actually this massive mid-market segment, mid to small, that is the majority of the market. And we don't ignore that in our analysis. But of course, when we look at these figures here now, we look at the top 100. So I just wanted to stress that. I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. I apologize. So I wanted to just say that in the conversations we've had for the Nimdzi 100, so when we look at how we create the Nimdzi 100, we look, of course, at the publicly traded companies. We look at the survey results, but we also run a lot of interviews with companies of all sizes, a lot of the big ones, but also some in the mid-market segment. And when I started having these conversations this year, I was really surprised to hear from maybe 90% of the companies I talked to that they had an exceptional year. Many talked about the best year ever, record growth back to not just pre-COVID, but whenever they had their best year before, and that they broke that as well. So I was really surprised to hear that at first. And then after a while, of course, we started to identify a red thread going through that, which we'll discuss a little bit more when we get into the market trends. Before we do that, I think it would be very important for us to address the mergers and acquisitions and also the investment wave in the industry. That has been going on, of course, for a while now. So in that sense, it's nothing new. but I feel like it has really reached like a new high because just not even just judging by feeling, it would be that it seems like every week someone announces that they got a new investment or are buying another company. And these are the results here as well. If you look at our survey this year, how many companies have said that they are interested in acquiring companies or receiving offers, and how many are not thinking about it at all. And you can see in comparison to last year, there's a very strong trend towards more interest in M&A as compared to the previous year, where the interest was already very high as well. Renato.
A comment that I would make here is that the story in the M&A space, it's not so much the M&A activity in itself. A big chunk, and I didn't count, I'm sorry, but a big chunk of the top 100 are already owned by private equity firms, and there's a lot of capital flowing into our industry. But the story in the M&A space is a jump in the valuation of companies, right? So, and this needs to be talked with a certain grain of salt, and to be aware of the fact that even though there have been valuations of over 10 times EBITDA, 12 times EBITDA for Moravia a few years ago, and this year I think that record was broken with LanguageWire getting something like 16 times EBITDA for their business. But the reality is that those valuations are the exception. The market still, for the majority of the businesses, which are smaller business under $5 million, those businesses have traditional valuations between 3 and 5 for the smaller ones, 5 and 7 for the medium-sized one. The 10, 12, 11, 15 kind of valuations as a multiplier for valuations are very rare, and they need to meet certain conditions: high EBITDA, fast growth, and the ability to generate cash. And there are very few companies in that position in the market. But still, valuations are high compared to what they have been historically.
Yes, absolutely. And it's kind of like, I talked to Jo, our M&A expert, about this, and he told me as well that this is kind of creating this growth circle as well. The evaluations go up. It's in some ways then attracting more investors. More companies are being bought up in a real seller's market, and it's a little bit of a take it or leave it situation now. Like either you pay the price or you can go home. And so it just continues in this spiral of growth.
It's a seller's market because there aren't many companies there are only 100 companies in the top 100, and maybe 40 or 50 of them have already been acquired. So there is a scarcity for companies that are large enough to be attractive to the type of capital that is in this market. This is an industry that requires very low capital investment and generates a good cash flow. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit, we're going to see more and more price pressure and some challenges that might affect the growth of companies.
Yes, and I briefly looked it up as well. And from our top 100, 30 companies are already PE-backed. And from what we know as well, the private equity firms have always been in the language industry, but now they are a lot more visible than in the past, which is also a major difference. Before we get to talking about prices, I just super briefly, because yesterday was International Women's Day, want to talk about the women-run LSPs in the top 100. Tucker, I think we have a lovely slide there as well. I didn't put the whole table here, but you can find it on our website, of course. But 17 out of the top 100 companies are run by women, 20% last year. So there's a slight dip there in comparison to the global average. That's still more than double. The global average is about 8.2% if we look at the Fortune 500. That sounds really good, and it certainly isn't bad. It is a positive step forward. But it is also worth highlighting that none of the women-run LSPs are in the top 10, and that they only generate about 6% of the total revenue of the top 100. In fact, the only LSP that is run by a woman that made it into the top 20 is the Translation Bureau from Canada. And basically, also the majority of the LSPs that are run by women are based in North America. What exactly that means for our industry is another story, and something I don't want to judge at this point. So I just wanted to highlight this as what the data showed us.
I think that if we look at the bottom 10,000, I think that this number will be the inverse. Will be probably 70% are women-owned and women-driven, and 30% men. But we have this, and maybe the CEO is a man, but a good example is Keyword Studio, or several other companies where the COO, the person really running the show, is a woman. So if we should look at the executive suite also. Maybe that's a study for us to run at some point.
It's true. Even though I have to stress that even in our C-suite hot seat show, we mostly talk to men, even though some really amazing, incredible women as well, who I personally consider role models. So very grateful for those conversations as well. Right. So I think, and with that, we can move on to some of the trends we identified. And the first one's yours, Renato.
Well, a few weeks ago, as you know, Nimdzi clients reach out to us with challenges. We have this feature that we call the office hours. So we're constantly talking to our clients about the challenges that they have and how to address them. And during the period of a week, I had 4 inquiries about pricing and price negotiations. And this was the end of the year, November, December, and which is a horrible time to talk about price, because this is the time that the clients are working on their budgets for the following year, and they are asking for price reductions. And this is a standard behavior. And I saw that we have some questions here about companies putting pressure on the providers, on the translators, on the smaller players to reduce costs. But the conversation here is happening at a global level, and it's not particular to the language industry. We see record inflation in most countries, and it's tending to rise now with the invasion of Ukraine. We have, on the other side, you see companies posting record profits. In the third quarter of 2021, it was the S&P 500 posted the highest profits than they had in history as a group. And you also have challenges like talent crunch, right? So the dynamics of the market are being affected by macroeconomic trends, and it's time for the industry to start talking about increasing prices. Why? Because we are dealing with scarcity of people to do all the job that needs to be done. The argument usually used by people having to negotiate prices is that, well, technology has increased productivity, and translators could be doing more work in less time. That way they should be being paid less because they're more productive and they can get the same level of revenue. And the reality is that this productivity improvement due to technology is a false premise, because and this is a problem that outsiders have when they look at the language industry. They think, oh, machine translation. It's like there is one machine translation that is going to do all the translation in the world, and all of a sudden productivity goes up because you don't need to translate anymore. The reality is that we have a plethora of tools and technologies, and translators have to switch, and projects are getting smaller and smaller, and sometimes translators have to work in 3-4 different tools that have different commands, different expectations. So the productivity of translators is actually going down instead of going up because of the complexity of this industry, right? So what is happening is that we have people leaving the industry, and we don't have translators wanting to join the industry because of it's not that attractive money-wise. There are better ways for you to make money, less stressful, and maybe just doing nothing is a choice. And this is an industry that is dominated. It's a profession that is dominated by women, even though they're not the majority in the C-suite. They are the majority in the execution level. And the choice is, hey, why do I have to work so hard not to get enough money to, I can have a better life, take care of my family, go on vacation and do whatever is necessary. So I think that we're seeing those indications. Translators are not getting what they expect. LSPs, who are in the middle, the single language vendors, are getting pressure from the multi-language vendors, and the negotiation needs to start at the top. So the big vendors need to ask for more money to the final clients. The LSPs get more money. The single language vendors get more money. The translators get more money. And we're not talking about small numbers. I'm in Italy this week. In the news in Italy is how the cost of energy has gone out, even before the Ukraine invasion, has gone up 5 times from 2021 to 2022, and that's happening with energy. That's happening with food. There is a lot of problems that we had with COVID with the supply chains, and inflation is a reality. So I'm talking about 20% increases. I'm talking about 25% increases. I'm not talking about 2 or 3% increases. It's a radical change in the way we measure prices in this space, and it's tough. There's going to be negotiation in here, but if we look at the bright side, if you're a salesperson in this market, if you increase the prices, your commission goes up. So start asking for more money from your clients. End of rant.
No, this was good, Renato. Thank you. And I'm glad you already tied it in with the talent shortage, which was actually, we kind of listed it as a separate trend, but of course they are completely connected, those two. And it's just and also the talent shortage, it's not something new. Again, it's something we've heard in the industry for a while, but again, it's something where we feel it has reached a new level. And it has come up in conversations with LSPs from all sides of the market and in all sorts of different ways as well.
So it's very easy to double content overnight, right? You can write, you can double the amount of content overnight. It takes you years to prepare a resource to be productive and to be able to deliver professional quality translation.
Yes.
And the automation is not there yet. As much as we want to talk about it, it's not there yet. Machine translation is very good. I use it. If you're not using it, you're wasting opportunity and time and money. But you need to be a professional to be able to use it. And you need to know that not all machine translations are equal. The same language pair, you translate from English into Japanese, you have one quality level. From Japanese into English is a completely different level. And this goes for subject matters, for specific industries and things like that. So the talent shortage is real and it's getting worse because content is growing and translators take time to develop.
Yes, and exactly what you addressed as well. Of course, LSPs are trying to address these challenges with increasing volumes, tighter budget, shorter deadlines, with more automation. And one of the effects is as well that the roles of the linguists are changing, and that's not always something, again, what people want. Maybe if you're a translator, you don't want to become a post editor, or again, it doesn't make sense financially for you to do that. So there's a lot of challenges that come with that. Another one I heard from some LSPs, especially in the media localization industry, Belen, maybe you can add something to that, where they told us they sometimes cannot hire as fast as the demand is growing. And then others were saying, okay, we find the right people, but we cannot afford to pay them, which ties back in with the other topic we just discussed. So they're definitely closely interconnected. I have a few more on my list, but Belen, do you want to add more about the media localization companies first?
Yeah, I mean, in the media localization, this is even more important because it's a hyper specialized vertical, and we have a huge explosion over the years, especially on video content for streaming platforms. Everything changed so fast. At the beginning, we had 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we had broadcasters, we had the theater, you go to the movies, and that's it. But now you have 20 different streaming platforms with so much content, all fighting for the end users, all fighting for the market, and everything needs to be localized. And yeah, we've discussed this with some companies. It's not about you can find more resources, you can train more resources, but it's about the hyper growth. So all of a sudden, Disney, Netflix, HBO, and Prime Video, they want to launch in Romania. And all of a sudden, you need to find 100 subtitlers for Romanian, but all the companies want the same. So it's basically, it's physically impossible to find all these resources in a very short period of time. And also the releases are, you don't have that much time. You don't have 3 years to prepare and to localize all the projects. So it's the amount of work, it's the short amount of time that you have to localize, and all the companies fighting for the same countries or regions at the same time. So yeah, that's been a huge topic in the conversations that we had with media localization and also game localization companies, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I found that this kind of hyper growth demand, really as an interesting example. And also then, even if you find those people, then what do you do with them after? Because the demand will drop immediately again. So these are some of the challenges in that area. Another one I found really interesting is that some were saying it's not just about talent acquisition, but also talent retention. Because a number of large LSPs have told us that they lost a lot of good people, not the exception, but a lot of good people to large tech companies as well. Because again, they are able to pay. I mean, if, for example, Microsoft makes you a good offer, it's,
you make more money as a project manager than as a translator.
Yes. So, and that was another challenge where in some cases people told me actually during the pandemic, when everything went remote, it solved that problem a little bit for them when they weren't basically located in the same city as the tech companies anymore, because technically they were, of course, but they can hire remotely. Whereas for others, the remote offering actually created another problem with talent, because then suddenly people received offers for remote jobs from companies based in the capital, where they could also pay better. Yeah, so there's different sides to this, but either way, it's definitely a topic that we have kept hearing from all sides of the industry. Yes, good call, Tucker, with the next slide there. Let's move on. So this is, for me at least, the core piece of my own analysis in the Nimdzi 100 now. And this is kind of piggybacking a little bit of what Belen already wrote about last year, where we said that the LSP is dead, which of course was a little bit of an exaggeration, but we wanted to highlight that more of the at least medium to large players are moving away from transactional work and entering more into strategic partnerships with their clients. And this trend didn't only continue in the last year, but it was really heavily accelerated. So that now we said we need to talk about a new type of LSP that is highly personalized, data-driven, and is going beyond language services as well. So there are many different layers to this topic. And for me, it all started out with hearing more and more that it's all about the end user. So basically, the discussions between LSPs and buyers are moving away from, say, purely talking about translation and localization. Of course, they're still talking about it, but that it's more about zeroing in on the best way to reach end users. And this is, again, coming more to the forefront as more people are gaining access to the internet with their mobile phones. So that really the power is literally placed in the hand of individual consumers. And it's all about reaching them as directly as you can, and also standing out in this world wide web of competition that we have, right? And one of the...
So let me just go back one slide.
Yeah, go back, Tucker. We're still on that slide for a bit. And I wanted to just briefly finish that what I kept hearing was that one of the outcomes of that was that more and more clients are asking for original content creation rather than just translation or localization, to tailor their content even more closely to their end users. That's
the key point. I think that the LSP's dead epithet could be explained more with the challenges that the traditional concept of LQA are facing. First of all, if you have a hard time finding translators, you're going to have a harder time finding editors. And we have found out here at Nimdzi, working with several end buyers of translation services, that they're spending too much time controlling a quality that nobody cares, because the only people who are really checking whether are looking at the two languages, at the English and the translation. I'm talking about software products. I'm not talking about subtitling, which anybody can do QA on the spot if you speak both languages. But most of the products are actually the end user only sees the translation. So the end user cannot spot translation mistakes unless they are really serious. So concepts like 92, 96, 98% quality level are old, and there needs to be a new conversation. And Tucker, our colleague, wrote a very interesting article about experiential LQA on Multilingual Magazine, and it's a conversation that it's going to grow, because it's impossible to maintain the LQA concept the way it has been until now. And yes, exactly. That it's a lot more becoming about the impact that it has on the end user, and that is the more interesting story as well. And we can see it in the demand for original content creation going up and up and up as well, in different sides of the market again. Another thing that ties into this kind of same idea of the new LSP is that we've also seen that more and more companies are offering consulting and insights to their clients. So they're also using their industry expertise to advise them on which markets to go into, which tech to use, and thereby kind of increasing their value proposition to their partners and becoming actually like real partners, cementing the relationship rather than just having this, maybe what was years ago, more of a transactional relationship, and this way moving into a real partnership. And what matches this development is also that we kept hearing that there's a much stronger push for vendor consolidation on the client side, and that it's more about long-term agreements. So it's all moving a lot closer. That was one other trend that stood out. Another one I briefly want to address in this whole overarching topic that I promise I will tie together at the end is that we again also kept hearing that LSPs are also going beyond language services. So it's not just LSPs broadening their portfolio with new language services, but also adding more adjacent services. So that's what we call services that are not directly language services, but they are kind of complementary. And same when I asked companies about their interest in mergers and acquisitions, most said, yes, absolutely, but only if the company is outside the language industry. And I thought that was very interesting, because LSPs are kind of broadening their horizon, is what this kind of tells me as well. So I promised I would tie this in, so I will. Just briefly. So what we're seeing is basically enterprise buyers are placing a much stronger emphasis on reaching their end users. To achieve this goal, what they want is content that is more closely tailored to their consumers to maximize the impact of their products and services. And as a result, LSPs are seeing a growing demand for original content creation.
And it's kind of pushing them into offering more adjacent services and to kind of solidify their position in the client supply chain that way. And so the bonds are becoming stronger between LSP and enterprise buyer, and it's becoming more of a real strategic partnership, which is kind of mirrored also in the fact that clients want to work with fewer vendors and have these long-term agreements. So basically, as enterprise clients are trying to get closer to their end users, LSPs are also getting closer to their clients and are forming stronger business relationships through consulting, strategic advisory, and services that fall outside the area of language services. And so as a result, then LSPs are widening their scope and are enhancing their value proposition. So this is more of a small topic, but I have found it significant to highlight as well. We have a new acronym, a multilingual meeting provider. Basically, of course, to no surprise to anyone, video conferencing has been booming, and we talked about it at length already, so I don't want to get into it too much. But a side effect of it was the so-called Zoom fatigue. After a while, everyone has been sick of being on more video calls. And so even people who have never used language services before, they kind of stumbled upon them, I would say, in a desire to make their virtual events and meetings more engaging and more accessible and inclusive, which have also become buzzwords, and rightfully so, because it's also been easier than ever now to make meetings accessible for everyone in the virtual realm. So then as a side effect, what we've seen is that, for example, of course, interpreting providers, they receive more requests for remote interpreting, but not all of the demand pivoted just to remote interpreting. We also got a lot more requests for multilingual live captioning or document translation for virtual events. And this is for all types of LSPs, the traditional translation LSPs, as well as the interpreting LSPs, or some that focus on maybe more audiovisual content. And the point here is that it seems that nobody does it all. Everyone sort of does a little bit of what's required here, because these are not the typical clients, maybe, for most of the language industry. They are clients that come in from a completely different area, and what they want is just to make their meetings accessible and engaging. And there is a little bit of a gap or an opportunity. A gap is always an opportunity, I guess, for someone to come in and fill this demand and do it all, specialize in providing multilingual meetings with all these different types of services, like the multilingual live captioning, document translation for online events, remote interpreting in all its different forms and shapes. Ideally, also sign language interpreting, I would encourage, and whatever else is needed. Renato, I feel like you have a comment because you took your glasses.
No. I think that this is very interesting. It's a good insight, and it's a consequence of the pandemic that behaviors have changed, and so new services come up.
Yes, and it's opened the door to new clients as well, absolutely, which is something we predicted would happen, and I'm pleased to see it did happen. So, and again, it's widening the scope for the language industry also going forward. It's not just going to stay like stand and fall with the pandemic. Yes, good call, Belen. So finally, we get to hear from Gabriel.
Right. Well, there's a lot to unpack and too little time, but I want to piggyback a little bit on what you talked about earlier, and that it's all about the end user. Here's the interesting bit, and as we're sort of scrambling to talk about the next big thing in our industry, I think AI is shaping up to be a big and important part of the conversation in the next decade. Here's why. Because in this rush towards appealing to the end consumer, AI is just another one of the vehicles that companies use to achieve that. You look at tools like Spotify or Netflix, you have all those personalized recommendations that come up. And a lot of that, while you look at AI being predominantly driven by the United States, that's the hotbed of investment into AI. Over time, there's a need for multilingual data that feeds these AI models. And this is a terrain of opportunity for LSPs today to tap into. You see a number there, and that's really just the tip of the iceberg of what we estimate is accessible to LSPs right now. If you think about it, it's just a drop in the bucket from the 60 billion. And what we anticipate is the demand is likely going to soar. We're really only just scratching the the surface of the possible applications of AI, although AI is very much present already. Now, there's another interesting bit here in that it's not a new topic. Companies in our space have been active in this segment for a number of years. But maybe it's time to start talking about it a little bit more, and more companies jumping on the bandwagon. It comes with its challenges, and scale is one of them, as a lot of these programs are being pushed by big tech companies from the United States. But there's opportunity also for smaller LSPs or medium-sized LSPs to develop expertise and competence in here. And why is that so? If you think about the starting point of this, that AI models need a lot of data. That data is, in a lot of cases, in English only. What LSPs are very adept at doing is managing complexity across a multitude of languages. So this is a key selling point for LSPs who are looking to tap into this segment. So yeah, watch out for what's going to happen in the space in the next years.
Thank you very much, Gabe. And yes, I agree. It's an exciting area to watch. My usual topic, interpreting, is up next. I'm going to keep it very short because I already wrote a whole interpreting index about this as well. But the main thing I want to address here on this slide as well is that remote interpreting is here to stay, because I get this question a lot. Like, is remote going away again? Is on-site being replaced? And so the answers are yes, remote interpreting is here to stay, but on-site interpreting will, of course, return, because there's always cases where it makes more sense to have an interpreter on site, for example, when dealing with children or mental health cases, end-of-life cases, high-stakes clients, the list goes on. But at the same time, remote interpreting, basically the pandemic has opened the door. The floodgates have been opened. Lots of fears have been removed. People have adapted and seen that there are a lot more opportunities. There's a lot more new clients. Zoom has become the largest platform for remote simultaneous interpreting, even though they are not traditionally an RSI provider, but purely by the number of meetings. What that also means is that interpreting has gone more mainstream, because Zoom is in the more mainstream space. Or we also see video remote interpreting in vaccine centers in the US or in Walgreens pharmacies. So what I'm trying to say is there's a whole lot more opportunity that came with it, and the market has widened. So here on the graph, you see a little bit, I did 3 different estimates for the market split. Again, you can find this, of course, on our website as well. And we estimate that the size of just the global interpreting market reached 8.3 billion in 2020. And we expected it to reach 8.8 last year. So there's a lot more to come in that area.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Super interesting insight so far. Thank you for sharing. And yes, I mean, this section is just to confirm everything that you just discussed in terms of trends. I think the trends that we have identified are very strong in the media and gaming industry. And well, basically the good news there, of course, there's been a huge growth in 2021, because in 2020, production of many content was stopped because of the pandemic, and then it got resumed in 2021. So everything came that last year to be localized. So we've seen that media localization companies grew an average of 24%, but we have to say that companies working more with streaming platforms are growing faster and more than companies specializing in broadcasting and film industry, because of course the streaming industry is growing faster and broadcasters and film industry is kind of shrinking in favor of streaming platforms. Another interesting thing to mention here is that media localization companies are growing not only because they are localizing more content, but again, because they are offering more adjacent content, adjacent services, as you mentioned before, Sarah. So more technical services such as distribution, packaging, QC for the content, catalog revision, and so on, metadata creation for the content in the streaming platforms, and so on and so forth. So there's been, also rebuilding what usually media localization companies offered, and that's been a huge opportunity. Then again, we talk about hyper growth and talent crunch already. We mentioned this, and also with the great renegotiation, I think this topic applies to all verticals, but I have the feeling that is super important in media localization specifically because the talent is limited here. You need to have very specific skill set. Not everybody has the skill set to be a good subtitler, to be a good translator for dubbing scripts. And it's not only translators, but also dubbing actors and actresses, dubbing talent. I don't know if you come from a dubbing country, but here in Spain, we listen to the same voices all over and over in all the shows, always the same voices, which is great. And I love dubbing actors from Madrid and Barcelona. I'm a huge fan. But you know, there's so much content, and at some point they cannot dub everything. So we need more talent also in the dubbing space, in the creative space. So this is something that we are seeing. And some of the media companies that we've been discussing for the Nimdzi 100 mentioned that they were able to renegotiate rates and raise them, which is basically confirming the trend that Renato started. And I think this is something for media companies, like they need to pay more, basically, if they want the best talent. If you want the highest quality, if you want not even the best talent, but the talent, because sometimes you don't even have anybody to localize your content because there's no more people. So yeah, we really need to start renegotiating also internally with internal stakeholders, really make a case for localization, talk about the impact that they are having in the global user experience, and fight for better rates, because it's the only way forward, I think. And in gaming, the same. I think gaming this year has been leading the way, apart from growing, of course, more and more. We've heard all these buzzwords like the metaverse, and this is something that has been in the gaming industry for ages, for not ages, but yeah, for decades. You could say that some games are already the metaverse, like Fortnite and Generation Alpha. The kids these days are already living in the metaverse, so we don't need to reinvent anything. Just look at what gaming is doing in terms of metaverse, and I think we will have good ideas of how virtual lives could look like and how to monetize virtual lives, because in gaming industry, companies have been selling virtual goods for a long time. So this is not new if we look at the gaming industry, but it seems to start being mainstream. And yeah, another good indicator for growth is that many companies are looking into the gaming space, companies that are not purely gaming. So for example, Netflix or Apple started their gaming divisions very recently. So this is only indicating that if big tech giants are looking at the gaming vertical as some vertical to invest, then it's a good place to be. And that means that we will see more growth in the upcoming years. So
thank you so much, Belen. Yeah, we're coming to the end here, and I actually apologize that we only have 5 minutes for questions, but we do have that time. So I briefly just want to say it's been an exciting 2 years. At the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know what was going to happen. We saw a slowdown in 2020, but the industry more than made up for it in 2021. And I believe that we are coming out stronger than we went into it. Because again, as we said, there's been new services, new markets, and people are better set up than ever before. All right, so in this brief time we got left, I would like to hear from the audience. Tucker, I know you've been monitoring the comments.
All the comments say that you guys are doing an excellent job and are 100% brilliant. I've deleted the other ones.
Oh, thanks. That's good. just as we like it. Are there no questions though to address? Maybe
there are questions. In the brief time that we have left, let's just go with one of the questions. One of the first questions that was submitted was TransPerfect made the $1 billion mark. How did they do it? Why?
How did they do it?
And this might be a Renato question.
Yeah. Just a quick answer. A combination of organic growth. TransPerfect is well known for having the biggest sales force in the industry and keeps growing. and some mergers and acquisitions. They had a significant acquisition last year of Semantics, the leading company in the Nordics. They were in the Nimdzi 100 in the previous years, and so that's how they got it there. People might not know, but TransPerfect is the biggest life sciences player in the industry, even though life sciences represents a fraction of all their business. They're still bigger than the next player in the space. I don't know, something like 5 to 10 times bigger. So it's a growth engine in itself. It's a sales-driven organization, and that's what drives their growth.
And last question here is from Carmen. What are some of the examples of additional services that you're talking about? Oh, but she said that you answered it. So nice job on that, Sarah. You already answered that question. And we'll be going through those questions and making sure that they are they're answered in due time. But like many others, I believe some of the folks on this call have a hard stop in 2 minutes. So Sarah, why don't you take us out and let us know where we can find additional information? What is in the full report? What's the difference between the ranking and the market report?
Oh, well, the ranking is mostly literally a ranking of the top 100 largest companies by revenue, whereas the full report goes a lot deeper. And we only really skimmed the top of it as well now during the live stream. There's a lot more detail, a lot more tables on all the growth, if that's what you're interested in, or if you want to know where the industry is headed with the different trends. There's a lot more detail in our report that you can find on the Nimdzi website. Actually, on the first page, you just scroll down a little bit, and as the first report is the Nimdzi 100. And of course, you can also reach out to me anytime, sarah@nimdzi.com, or to any of my lovely colleagues. So we're always happy to help out and answer any questions.